First, let me tell you when it all began and where. It was after that war, the one in which the entire world turned upside down twice and couldn't decide which was its right side. The earth expelled its wounds with silent sounds, and our small country didn't yet know exactly how to stand upright with Hebrew in its mouth. In those days, among the sand dunes of Ramat HaSharon that was like a distant island in the Sea of Time, 3 hours' drive from Tel Aviv, not because of distance, but because of roads that weren't in a hurry to get anywhere. There, on Lamerhav Street 40, stood a small house made of simple wooden boards. Not a house of Jerusalem stone, not a tall building, but a modest home that promised only what it could deliver: shelter from the scorching sun and a warm embrace on winter nights. Joe Davis, Carney's father, as all the neighbors called him, laid the first wooden board. Joe was a handsome man, with eyes that brought with them distant New Zealand, his homeland beyond oceans and beyond dreams. He came here as a soldier in the Australian-New Zealand Army, with a rifle in one hand and a small suitcase in the other. And when he was discharged and handed over the rifle, he was left with only the suitcase and 100 pounds covered in dust and hope. He met Ruth Lehman on this path, daughter of a Jerusalem family, amazingly precise in her exactness, a socialist with passionate faith, German order in her soul, Hebrew compassion in her heart. And she loved him, this dreamer with earth under his fingernails. Already in the first days, everyone knew this house would be different. Perhaps because of the telephone, a rare object in those days of austerity, placed with quiet pride in the corner of the room. Perhaps because while everyone else worked the land, Joe worked with words, in government journalism, and Ruth tended to souls, a social worker who established the first foster families in the country. But more than anything, it was the green that burst from the sands, against all odds. For Joe Davis was the best gardener in the world. At least that's what little Carney thought, who saw her father go out every morning to the garden with a watering can and a smile, and return in the evening with the same smile, only with more earth under his fingernails. If they had tried to describe Joe Davis's character in color, they would have chosen green. Not the bright green of young grass, but the deep, mature green of a thick-stemmed leaf that had already seen winter and 2 dry seasons. Among the plants in the small garden, Carney and Danny, the children, also grew. They grew between their father's stories about distant New Zealand and the nighttime conversations about social justice that Ruth brought from her work. For in this house, children from institutions were not foreign plants. All people are equal, Carney learned almost before she learned to tie her shoelaces. And then, one day, the crate arrived. Not just any crate, but the lift. A giant wooden crate from New Zealand, an inheritance from Grandma Rosetta. On that day, all of Ramat HaSharon gathered to witness the miracle. A giant truck spitting out carved furniture, delicate porcelain, and the scent of a different history. The neighbors lined up in a long row, passing the treasures from hand to hand, and the small house on Lamerhav Street 40 filled with wonders from a distant land. On that day, the small house became an island of different in a sea of uniformity. In the kitchen, Papa Joe ruled with a masterful hand. He was the balabusta, learning to cook from Gladys, the foster mother, preparing dishes that spread unfamiliar aromas through the streets of old Ramat HaSharon. In this, too, they were different. But life doesn't content itself only with blooming gardens and dramatic lifts. On Lamerhav Street 40, tragedy struck. Mother and father fell ill in the same year. Playing tag, that's how Carney's friend described it, going in and out of the hospital, taking turns in the white beds, smiling pale smiles to the children who waited at home. In the midst of this chaos, like angels sent by chance, unexpected guests arrived, a young Dutch couple, Niels and Hannah, with a giant Land Rover. Joe, even in his illness, was generous as always. "Park by the house," he said. "Eat with us, shower with us, sleep in the car." They became part of the family. But the angels left 2 weeks before the other angel arrived, the one with black wings. Ruth died at age 44 from an asthma attack, when Carney was 8 years old. When the children returned home that day, the house was different. The empty space that Mother left was too big for the small house. The house on Lamerhav Street 40 changed.